I'm Still Here. Written by David Scott. Read by Ruby Wax.
Vic Valance was a living statue, and every day he remained as still and lifeless as Amanda Holden's forehead. Sure, if tourists happened to stop at his pitch outside the Museum Britannica and throw him a coin, Vic would give them a slow-motion wave. But apart from that, all he had to do all day was nothing. Vic Valance was a man who was scared of life itself. A foreign holiday was a plane crash waiting to happen. Posting a letter was a chance to paper cut a major artery. And taking out the rubbish spelled death at the hands of a wheelie bin serial killer. The best thing to do at all times, he reasoned, was to do nothing. And he'd found himself the perfect job for a man of inaction. It was a sweet job, but things had started to turn sour. A bunch of panpipers had invaded his zone of economic interest. And worst of all, he was developing a twitch, career death for any professional stylist. Our story begins on one particularly unprofitable, wet and twitchy day. As Vic was pondering other inactive careers, vegan butcher, Amish IT consultant, he was approached by a mysterious woman. Was she a holidaymaker bearing loose change? Was she a pisshead about to inflict a nipple cripple? No. The woman explained that her name was Katrin, and along with the half-detective, half-mustache standing next to her, she worked for Special Branch. Vic panicked, trying to think of an excuse for having done nothing about applying for a street performance license. But Katrin was not interested in busker bureaucracy. She had a tantalizing proposition.
We need you to help us foil a robbery.
Vic was all ears.
Priceless artifacts from museums across the world have been stolen by a criminal mastermind known as The Finger. Our intelligence is telling us that he's planning his next hit on the Museum Britannica.
So what's that got to do with me? Replied Vic, using his powers of street mime.
You bear an incredible resemblance to a statue in the museum. We would like you to take the place of their sculpture of Achilles and let us know when the finger strikes.
Sounds a bit involved, thought Vic. So he played it cool.
Of course, you will be compensated with a bounty on his head if you help us. You'll be in line for £10,000.
Yes, thought Vic. 10 grand. He knew he'd been right to sit on his hands all his life. Finally, he was going to get his reward. In your collective face, ex-teachers, girlfriends, and career advisors. That night, Achilles Valance met Katrin at the Museum Britannica.
Why midnight?
It's the only time we could guarantee that the museum would be empty. Anybody who works here could be on the Finger's payroll, from the curators to the bag checks to the cleaners. We can't let anybody get wind of our plan.
While the fuzzy cop kept watch, Katrin navigated Vic past an endless series of locks, cameras, and laser sensors on the way to the Great Hall where Achilles was exhibited. Vic was agog at all the riches on display. How could so many exquisite cultural treasures be assembled in one building, he wondered. Although he suspected it was something to do with Victorians and big guns. Finally, Vic was face to face with his statuesque doppelganger. The resemblance was uncanny.
Wow. I'm dumbstruck.
That'll help. Now, we don't know exactly when the Finger is planning to strike, so I need you to stand here and remain completely still for as long as possible.
Together they lifted the statue carefully off its plinth and put it safely away in a museum storeroom, and then returned to the Great Hall.
As soon as you're sure the Finger and the rest of the gang are inside the museum, pull this sword. An alarm will ring out and the place will flood with officers, okay?
Alarm? Gangs?
He'd spent all day getting into character, i.e. painting himself white, that he hadn't even begun to consider how much he'd be involved in it all.
You know, you don't have to do this. You can forget all about it if you want. Although, that would include the reward.
Thinking about the 10,000 pounds and how big a hat he'd need for that amount of spare change, Vic made the decision to do nothing about leaving.
It's time to step up to the plinth.
I knew I could rely on you. You're rock solid.
Vic smiled and went to shake her hand. But Katrin gave him a kiss instead.
I'm relying on you.
And without further ado, she exited, leaving Vic to prepare for the performance of his life. Over the next few days, Vic discovered life on the inside wasn't much better than life on the outside. Every day, a cleaner obliviously sprayed pledge into his eyes. Every day, some kid on a school trip stuck chewing gum under his nose. And thanks to his unfortunately inviting pose all day, every day, students took selfies while pretending to bum him. Even when the death-breathed tour guide described what a dullard face Vic had and how the ancient sculpture must have had been making a comment on the essential idiocy of humanity, he didn't flinch or even twitch. This was extreme inaction in action. Vic was the Prince of Passive, the Emperor of Immobility, the Sultan of Still. One night, Vic took a break to enjoy his favorite perk of his temporary employment, using the disabled toilets, knowing there wasn't a disabled person waiting outside. But as he strolled out to the accompaniment of a dying flush, with a rolled-up newspaper tucked under his arm, Vic spotted 3 figures emerging from an air vent and froze. It wasn't clear which of them the finger might be, as they were each disguised as woodland animals. The squirrel, the fox, and the hare scuttled through the great hall, none of them noticing Achilles' toga was tucked into his pants. Once the thieves had passed, Vic corrected himself, then pulled the sword to alert Katrin and Special Branch. But there was silence. The finger must have foiled the hidden alarm. Terrified now, he switched on his phone to summon Katrin. As it rang, he cursed himself for having ever got involved. Suddenly, Vic heard the thieves' footsteps. Vic froze as Foxface passed by, gleefully holding aloft a bag of museum swag. Fortunately, the thieves were too busy to spot the anomaly of a mythical demi-deity gabbing away on a mobile phone. Suddenly, Vic felt, despite all he had held as natural, that this was the moment in his life when he should actually do something.
Hold it there, Finger. This place is surrounded.
The trio stopped and pulled out their crowbars. Vic's bravery shrank like a dick in an ice bucket, and he sprinted out of the hall. He quickly found himself in a gallery full of statues lovingly liberated from the ancient world, and as a special treat for being so brave, Vic allowed himself a giant twitch, then took his place among the internationally pilfered artifacts. The burglars split up. The squirrel entered a gallery by passing the Egyptian mummy, an ancient skeleton, a Greek statue holding a fire extinguisher. One down, 2 to go, thought Vic. Stilly, stilly, catchy thiefy. In the Bronze Age room, the fox didn't notice anything unusual, only a statue whose eyes and body seemed to follow him around the room. Probably nothing, thought the fox, just as Vic gave him a close-up look of a 4,000-year-old frying pan. What fun, thought Vic. How wrong he'd been about fox hunting. So now it was just Vic and Big Ears. The hare gave chase and soon caught his runaway statue, trapped in a dead end. He smiled broadly and then unleashed a lightning punch to Vic's face. Except it wasn't Vic's face, it was Zeus. The thief shrieked in agony, cradling his broken hand. Vic appeared from behind the statue of Zeus and lamped the robber with a nearby sign. Vic tied the masked villains up using bits of old rope carelessly left in a museum display case. He'd done it, thwarted a multi-million-dollar burglary, and caught the Finger single-handedly. Not bad for a Mr. Do-Nothing. As he pulled the final knot tight, one of the thieves began to speak in English, more broken than Venus de Milo.
Who you are, mister?
Vic was only too happy to explain the trap that the special branch and he had so carefully laid, exchanging the statue of Achilles with himself in order to catch the legendary art thief and his gang.
All right, then. It's time to find out who is the so-called Finger.
We are not fingers. We are proud Peruvians come to take back what is rightfully ours.
Inside their bag was a rather crummy-looking piece of ethnic cutlery.
This sacred spoon of Lima, stolen from our ancestors by Spanish conquistadors, and then stolen from them by the French, and then saved for the world by the British.
What a story that is. Anyway, we'll soon find out who the mastermind is. The Finger.
As it rang for what seemed an interminable time, the chatty thief piped up.
If you are not Achilles, where is the real statue?
He dropped the phone and dashed to the storeroom where he and Katrin had carried Achilles. Vic felt sick. All that sat there was an anthropomorphic Hoover, gawping at him cheerfully. Achilles was gone.
No need to worry about the police, my friend. They don't even know he's been stolen. 10 million. I was hoping for a bid a little nearer to priceless. Why don't you call me later with a more serious offer?
Back in the Museum Britannica, Vic let the South American patriots escape with the big wooden spoon Britain had pocketed so many years ago, partly because it seemed like the right thing to do, and partly because the lecture about the cultural significance was starting to drag. Reality descended on Vic like a pile of truth bricks. Now he was an accessory to the theft of a priceless statue. Whatever was he going to do? The answer was obvious. He returned to his plinth and pulled the Achilles poles once again. For the time being, Vic figured it was better to conceal his crime by doing nothing. Absolutely nothing at all. Vic reasoned he was now better off. The twitch had deserted him. He was working in the dry. He didn't have to listen to panpipes, and he'd learned something too. That you shouldn't be afraid. Very, very, very occasionally to do something. Goodbye.